On this Thursday night, replacing quarantines with rapid tests.
It's about knowing that you're safe before you get on.
The first of its kind pilot project about to take off at a Canadian airport. A trend Quebec is desperate to reverse.
We need to do something.
As BC and Alberta set records again. Turmoil in Nigeria over police brutality.
To just continue the street protests.
The escalating chaos and violence. And American election predictions, how pollsters got it wrong in 2016 and why they're more confident this time.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is a tentative move being made that could lead to the end of the 14-day quarantine period for travelers coming into Canada. The federal and Alberta governments are launching a pilot project being tested in Alberta that will allow Canadians returning to the country to take a COVID-19 test on arrival. If they test negative, they will not need to quarantine, though they will need to have a second test 6 to 7 days later. Alberta's premier, who himself is self-isolating because one of his ministers has tested positive, says it's time to return to normal, safe travel. And the airlines agree. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
It's a day WestJet's CEO has waited 8 months for.
It's not an overstatement to say that today's announcement is actually the first piece of good news we have received as an airline since February the 29th, when I sat on a Sunday afternoon watching our bookings get outstripped by cancellations.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney believes this new testing plan will help get the province's economy moving again.
We cannot turn our back on the travel industry, the tourism industry, and the Albertans whose lives have been thrown into upheaval as a result of the pandemic.
Starting November 2nd, people arriving into Alberta from abroad can voluntarily take a COVID-19 test at Calgary Airport or the main US land crossing. They must then proceed into a 14-day quarantine as before. If the test comes back negative, they can leave quarantine. However, they must provide a second test on day 6 or 7 and must not visit high-risk settings in that 2 weeks. Alberta is also rolling out advanced pre-departure tests for people who plan to travel abroad. On Tuesday, Europe's busiest hub of London Heathrow introduced a rapid 1-hour COVID test for people flying to Hong Kong.
It's about knowing that you're safe before you get on. Otherwise, if you land in the destination country and you did test negative, then you'll be put into an isolation.
This could all inform the future of air travel. Toronto's Pearson Airport is investigating the use of rapid pre-departure tests too and trialled tests for arriving passengers last month. But some experts say testing everyone, especially people coming from low infection countries, is a waste of precious resources.
Now we have lots of community transmission that is local and homegrown. So allowing another travel case into the mix may be a drop in the bucket relative to what's actually going on in a given location.
The programme at Calgary's airport could soon expand to Edmonton, with Canada's other international hubs watching closely too. Redmond Shannon, Global News.
And we are watching the COVID-19 numbers in Canada tonight. Again, there are signs case numbers are on the rise, spreading through some communities too quickly to effectively contact trace. There were more than 1,000 new cases reported in Quebec today, and 20 people there died. The Premier said to reduce close contact, all Quebecers who can work from home should now do that.
At this time, we need to reduce even the risk of contact because we cannot afford to continue having about 1,000 new cases every day. So we need to do something.
And the virus is now beginning to spread faster in western provinces, which had low numbers over the summer. If you look at the number of active cases per capita across Canada right now, Manitoba leads the country with 130 active cases per capita. Quebec is second with 105. Alberta has 77 active cases per capita, and Ontario 43. A second wave of COVID-19 has hit British Columbia too. 274 new cases were reported there today, the highest ever in that province. Alberta also set a new record, 427 new cases there today. One of the other indicators to keep an eye on is the positivity rate, the percentage of tests that are coming back positive. The higher the number, the more concerning it is. Mike Drolet explains.
Alberta's surge of new COVID-19 cases is not slowing. Daily case records are being broken. For all its testing, 2.5% came back positive for the virus, its highest number since early May. But Premier Jason Kenney, himself in isolation after one of his cabinet ministers tested positive, remains bullish on a plan to boost Alberta's economy.
I invoked the British slogan that during the Blitz, keep calm and carry on. We cannot shut down our lives, and our twin goal here is protecting both lives and livelihoods.
COVID-19 numbers may be rising, but he says Alberta has suffered enough economically with the energy price collapse.
It tells me that not everyone's on the same page. And it tells me that the public health stratagem is heavily politicized. And I understand why that happens.
Every province is looking at the data. One of the most effective is positivity rate, with 2.2% of all tests in Canada coming back as positive since the start of the pandemic. But recent data reveals not all regions with high daily case numbers are experiencing the pandemic equally. BC broke a daily case record Wednesday, but its positivity rate is only 1.7%. Alberta is 2.5%. In Manitoba, that rate is nearly double at 4.8%, just behind Quebec at 5%. And while Ontario is right on the average at 2.2%, Toronto's 4.4% is considered to be in the high alert range for jurisdictions.
It's concerning for all of us, but we're looking to see what action the measures that we put in place are going to have.
Looking ahead, epidemiologists worry of virus fatigue, especially with higher positivity numbers expected.
We knew we were going to have a hard fall and probably a hard winter. We knew this was coming.
The question now is how we're all going to deal with it. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
There were more than 800 new cases reported in Ontario today, and there are more outbreaks of COVID-19 in hospitals there. An outbreak has been declared at Scarborough General Hospital. 6 patients have tested positive in one unit. At the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute's University Centre site, 4 patients have COVID-19. There are outbreaks as well at St. Michael's Hospital, St. Joseph's Health Centre, Toronto Western Hospital, and the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health. All the facilities say they've taken steps to contain the spread, including more rigorous cleaning and increased testing of patients and staff. It is the deadliest day of the pandemic in Manitoba. 4 more people have died of COVID-19 there, and 147 new cases were reported. Community spread is a problem, and so beginning on Monday, new restrictions will go into effect in the Northern Health Region and Churchill. The new rules will be the same as those in place in Winnipeg, including gatherings limited to 5 people, casinos and entertainment facilities closed, and lower occupancy limits for a number of businesses. All schools in the north and in Winnipeg will have tighter restrictions imposed as they're elevated to the orange alert level. There is an outbreak at Manitoba's largest poultry plant, Excelador, in Blumenort, south of Winnipeg. 27 people there have tested positive for COVID-19 and 1 employee has died. The provincial government says there's no evidence the virus is spreading between employees within the plant itself and that the cases appear to be the result of community transmission. In Ottawa, the prospect of a snap federal election is off the table for now, but the opposition is continuing to push for answers from the government about its handling of the pandemic. It wants a committee formed that would have sweeping powers to call cabinet ministers as witnesses and force the government to hand over thousands of documents. The Liberals say the motion is so broad it would paralyze their handling of a second wave of the pandemic. Mike LeCouture explains.
I think the member opposite is right, that when we work together, Canadians appreciate it and our response is stronger.
What a difference a day makes. 24 hours after daring opposition parties to trigger an election, the government was preaching cooperation in the House of Commons. But the latest Conservative motion is calling for a full review of the government's response to the first wave of the pandemic, including the rollout of rapid tests and the procurement of protective equipment.
So we can prepare better for the second and possibly future waves of COVID-19. That is what this motion will accomplish.
Liberal sources say disclosing contract information could affect the government's ability to negotiate future deals for things like vaccines or PPE. Health officials would have 15 days to produce all documents, which the government argues is too tight of a timeline for the mountain of work.
The government is willing to work with the opposition to come up with a timeline that is reasonable.
Now, that sense of collaboration in Parliament also had a hint of condemnation, with the leader of the Bloc Québécois telling the Liberals to stop threatening votes of non-confidence.
They take all the businesses who need help in Canada and they stick a knife under their throat. And they tell the Bloc Québécois and the Quebecers and the Canadians and the Conservatives, do what we say.
One government source tells Global News they don't want a repeat of Wednesday's political drama. But the reality is that threat will remain as long as we have a minority government. Donna?
Okay, Mike Lucatura in Ottawa, thank you. People on a First Nation in Northern Ontario are facing a huge upheaval in their lives because of a worsening water crisis. Hundreds of people have had to leave their homes on the Neskantaga First Nation. The remote community is about 430 kilometers northeast of Thunder Bay. It's only accessible by air or by ice road in the winter. For 25 years, that community has been under a boil water advisory, and this month it got worse. An oily sheen was spotted in the water reservoir, and the treatment plant had to shut down. There is no longer any running water at all in the community. Residents have been airlifted to Thunder Bay. The chief says they will not return until it is safe.
You hate to see your relatives, your children, your future living in this condition, and there seems to be no end. It's one problem after another, and everything we get is just a Band-Aid solution.
The water testing and repairs are expected to take weeks. Today, the Deputy Prime Minister was asked about the crisis. Chrystia Freeland repeated a promise the government has made before, that the Liberal government is committed to ensuring all communities in Canada have safe drinking water. In northern Colorado, hundreds of people have been ordered to leave their homes because of a fast-moving wildfire. This is the East Troublesome Fire. It's tearing through an area packed with homes, cabins, and businesses. It's burning around 2,000 hectares every hour. Towering flames are being fueled by strong winds. The public is being warned there could be widespread destruction. The fire has burned 50,000 hectares so far and is already the fourth largest in Colorado's history. Round two coming up. Donald Trump and Joe Biden prepare to face off on the big stage in the second presidential debate. Turning to the U.S. now, if you missed the last presidential debate, you get a second chance tonight. President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden will be back on stage. Trump did so much interrupting in the last debate, it was widely panned as pointless and frustrating. Organizers of this one are hoping new rules will help keep things under control, but it is 2020, and as Jackson Prosco reports, anything is possible.
Divided by plexiglass and politics, the final debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is perhaps the last chance to redefine the race.
It's not just convincing the undecided, it's also changing the minds of people who've already committed to Joe Biden. So right now, the president has the most to lose.
This late in the game, the second-round matchup is likely more show than substance. More than 40 million Americans have already voted. The number of undecided voters is dwindling, while Biden is polling consistently ahead in key swing states.
Joe Biden is in the driver's seat. He's doing really, really well.
There is only one America.
Biden is spending big on TV ads airing during the World Series.
There is so much we can do if we choose to take on problems and not each other.
Trump's campaign is pulling ads in key states and has fallen behind on fundraising. The president's last-ditch attempt to launder unproven allegations against Biden and his son Hunter hasn't moved the needle.
I wish you would interview Joe Biden like you interview me.
Though he's running against Biden, Trump spent the day on the attack against the press, releasing his own recording of his upcoming interview with 60 Minutes, featuring a lengthy airing of grievances.
Well, then you brought up a lot of subjects that were inappropriately brought up. They were inappropriately brought up right from the beginning.
All of it suggests Trump has no plan to change his message track now, despite the fact that the same polls that put Biden ahead suggest Americans are deeply concerned with real issues, like the pandemic that has killed 220,000, or the economy that has left 10 million unemployed. Things can always change, but the incumbent president faces a difficult road to Election Day.
Jackson, the last debate was, well, it was hard to watch. They're trying something new tonight, right?
They are, Donna, to make sure that people at home can understand the candidates and what they stand for. The start of each of the 6 segment topics will give each candidate 2 uninterrupted minutes to make their point. And to make sure they're uninterrupted, they're going to mute the opposing candidate's microphone. Donna, that doesn't guarantee that any shouting won't be picked up by the other mic, but it should certainly make it easier for people at home to understand what the candidates are actually saying.
Okay, to quote the president, we'll see. Jackson in Washington, thanks. Still ahead, the president of Nigeria responds to violent anti-police protests. Nigeria's president is appealing for calm as violent anti-police protests continue there. Looting and gunfire broke out in Nigeria's largest city today. Anger is building since the shooting deaths of civilians by security forces this week. The government denies it happened. A curfew is in place in Lagos and several other states, but as Crystal Gamansing reports, it isn't working.
A smoldering supermarket, shoppers running to safety after looters set this fire in Lagos. Flames rising from a jail the military called in to deal with a riot inside. Just 2 examples in a series of sometimes violent protests across Nigeria. People have taken to the streets calling out police brutality, allegations of beatings, and corruption.
Your voice has been heard, loud and clear, and we are responding.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari called for the demonstrations to end, but he did not address reports that protesters have been killed.
And I can't give you the actual number of casualties because I'm not God. I had to run for my life.
Amnesty International confirmed through witness interviews, videos, and hospital reports that at least 12 peaceful protesters were killed by authorities at 2 protest locations in Lagos. The demonstrations began 2 weeks ago after a video was shared. It appeared to show the killing of an unarmed man by members of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. Officials have called it fake. Kennedy Liu lives in Canada but has family in Nigeria. He says more people are joining the protests in Nigeria as they see demonstrations being shut down and people beaten and violently arrested by police.
Now the violence is getting closer to the middle class. It's hitting the industrial side of Lagos, the tech side of Lagos. It's hitting areas like Lekki, where you see upper Nigerian youths and middle class who are also now see themselves as victims of this violence.
Canada and Britain have expressed concern over reports of excessive use of force.
It's a complex situation, but Canada is always, we hope, a firm believer in human rights and protecting human rights.
Nigeria's president, however, says foreign governments should not pass judgment without all the facts. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Trusting the U.S. pollsters, what went wrong in 2016 and what's different this time? Every American election is important, but Time magazine wanted to make a point about this one, so it changed the cover of its November 2nd edition. The word time is replaced with the word vote. Time's editor-in-chief says we stand at a rare moment, one that will separate history into before and after for generations. It does feel like there is a great deal at stake, and every 4 years, pollsters get busy trying to gauge the mood of America. In 2016, almost all of them got it wrong. Tonight, Eric Sorensen has a flashback to the days leading up to that election and looks at what pollsters are doing differently this time.
CNN now projects that Donald Trump will carry the state of Wisconsin.
In 2016, the U.S. networks were as stunned as the campaigns themselves.
This is a state that Hillary Clinton hasn't even visited.
Hillary Clinton didn't go to must-win Wisconsin in the final weeks because she and everyone else believed the polls. The final polling average gave Clinton a 6-point lead in that state. On Election Day, Trump won by about 1 point. Wisconsin may have been the biggest miss, but it wasn't the only one that puzzled experts.
Mike Murphy, what did you miss?
Oh boy, I missed a lot.
What eluded pollsters in 2016? In part, undecideds broke strongly for Trump instead of the usual 50-50. A lot of third-party support flipped in the end to Trump, and some polling didn't give enough weight to less educated voters. That voting group doesn't respond as readily to pollsters, but they still voted, and mostly for Trump.
So a lot of soul searching. After 2016, the polling industry has put a lot of resources into it. For 2020, the industry has really focused on ensuring that the polls are robust.
Pollsters are once again confident this year because the data have been more consistent.
4 years ago, the polling averages showed Hillary Clinton in blue and Donald Trump in red were often neck and neck through 2016, and it was volatile. Clinton would surge ahead and Trump would close the gap, and it was like that all the way to Election Day. 2020 is different. Joe Biden in blue started in January with about a 6-point lead, and the polling averages have kept that lead all the way through the year. There has been remarkably little volatility this year, and Biden still has about a 7 to 8 point lead.
The odds are definitely against Trump. He has a path to victory. It's just that it's much narrower than Joe Biden's.
To get an accurate snapshot, pollsters continually rebalance data by age, gender, race, even education.
This is why all the pollsters are working on a likely voter model where they try to estimate what will be the composition of the electorate.
What the polls can't always capture, though, is the enthusiasm, the turnout. Democrats know that.
We can't be complacent. I don't care about the polls. There were a whole bunch of polls last time. Didn't work out.
And so, in Wisconsin, Democrats are getting out a huge early vote. What's driving them to come out?
What isn't? Everything is driving me here today.
If the polls do miss this time, it could be the other way, by underestimating the Democrats' motivation to vote in 2020. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
That is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Cenotaph in Stratford, Ontario. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.